Money, let's just say, was not a focus of our work. If you dedicate yourself to a mission that you are passionate about to help other people, then the money will come.
In this World Heart Day episode of Conversations Beyond the Brand,
Dr. Tashana Thompson speaks with Celina Gorre, CEO of WomenHeart, about how branding can be a powerful tool for advocacy, awareness, and organizational growth.
My mom is probably the seed of all of the work that I do, my sisters do, and we lost her at a very young age of 39. She died of colon cancer. Without really conferring with one another, we all have taken up the work of improving the health of people because we don't want people to go through what we went through, losing our mom so early.
What's a message that you want to share with women, especially those women who say, I'm so busy, they're high achieving women. What do you want them to hear loud and clear?
Your suffering is not helping anybody. I want them to know that your self-care is what is going to make you that much better of a mom, that much better of a partner. You know, when you are healthy, your family is healthy.
The race and gender components, bias that carry over into heart health. What can you say to that?
You know, I think that
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations Beyond the Brand, the weekly podcast where we sit down with purpose-driven leaders and talk about the work, the vision, and the values that shape their brands. I'm your host, Dr. Tashana Thompson, and today's episode is so special. They're all special, but this one is very special to me. This season, we're talking all about wearing your values. And I couldn't think of a better guest to have this conversation with than the CEO of WomenHeart, Celina Gorre. I'm really excited to have you. And with World Heart Day right around the corner, we're talking about something that doesn't just, it doesn't get the spotlight it deserves, and that's women's heart health. Celina is not only a fierce advocate of women living with an at-risk for heart disease, she's a mission-driven leader whose work embodies our season 2 theme, wearing your values. So, Celina, I'm so excited to have you today.
thank you so much, Tashana. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for being here. So, I want to hear it in your own words. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness. I am a leader of a women's heart health organization here in the US, but my background is really in global health. I have traveled the world. I think I'm at 76 countries
Wow.
and counting. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in Asia. I've worked in all the continents with the exception of Antarctica. And before joining Women Heart back in 2019 here in Washington, D.C., I was in London for 8 years. And so I guess you can call me kind of a world citizen, really passionate about health in general. But these last 6 years, obviously, super laser focused on women's heart health. And it needs a lot of help, as you just said, Tashana. It's our number one killer.
Yeah,
And you know, it shocks me every day that not everybody knows that. So we've got a lot of work to do at Women Heart on that issue.
absolutely. So, you're being modest and humble and talking about your resume and the work that you've done. But literally, you've worked in global health for decades and everything from the United Nations to global nonprofits. What drew you to this work?
My mom is probably the seed of all of the work that I do, my sisters do. Um, my dad was also a mission purpose driven leader. His vocation, his work was in youth development in our hometown of Oxnard, California. My mom was a chemist, but she was also a community leader, was a big leader in our church. And we lost her at a very young age of 39. She died of colon cancer. And I think without really conferring with one another, my sisters and I, other three of us, we all have taken up the work of um, improving the health of people in our own little kind of corner of the world. And I think that's because we don't want people to go through what we went through, losing our mom so early. I was 18. My youngest sister was 13 when we lost my mom, and so I work in women's heart health. My middle sister works in cancer. And then my youngest sister works in HIV and AIDS. And I think it's just sort of, um, I call it our family business.
Wow.
And so that's sort of the impetus, or maybe the origin story of all of the three of us, our passion and commitment to improving the health of everybody.
Oh, wow. What a powerful legacy. Like, I've known you for many, many years, and we've had many in-depth conversations, but I've never heard it come out of you that way. And
Mm.
talk about wearing your values. Like,
Yeah, it is power. I mean, I think, lost at such an early age when it's not normal, let's
yeah.
just say. Um it really shapes us, right? In various ways, and unexpected ways. But yeah, I think that was a real driver for all of us, all three of us. And I'll say too that um it was such a gift having the parents that I had, because it was never explicit, but none of us, money, let's just say, was not a focus of our work. And I think we observed, and we have lived out um, this value that if you dedicate yourself to a mission that you are passionate about to help other people, then the money will come. And that has been our experience across the board. So that's just really interesting, to think about it in those terms, when I think in today's society, it's challenging, right? This is a really challenging economy. It's really challenging economic times. And for young people just starting out, I still give that message anytime I get to talk to young people who are just starting out in their careers. But I realize it's a really hard message to hear, because it's so difficult, right, in this world. I don't want to take us off course, but I just feel like
No, it's
that
so
was,
true. It's so
yeah,
true. Like, um, I was just telling you, like, even with this podcast, I'm not here to talk about the work that I do, that I get to do with Women Heart, or, getting you to give me some lofty testimonial. It's really about the connection and the conversation
yeah,
and doing what I love to do. I love these conversations.
yeah.
When the other things will come, and you have proven that throughout your career, and that's been something that's been really important in my career. Like, I don't just work with anybody, I've given money back. If I don't feel some type of connection to it, or I know it's going to be like we all say in small business owners, all money ain't good money. Right? So, um it is true. And I think that younger generations are much more concerned about their peace than we were, and their health, and their mental health. That
Yeah,
wasn't a thing when
yeah,
I was coming up, right?
yeah,
So you're not taken off course, because all these things are important to our values and what we hold near and dear. Um, but I do want to talk a little bit about, like, how you came to become the CEO of Women Heart in 2019.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, um, like I mentioned in the beginning, I've had a very meandering journey, and I want to say from the outset, no one has a career like mine without incredible helpers along the way. Whether I call them explicitly mentors or not, I think about my journey with so much gratitude. I can think about key bosses who took a chance. I can think about my very first boss after I graduated from college. I was not ready to go out there into the big bad world. And I stayed at UCLA and worked as a full-time person in the orientation team of UCLA. And thank goodness Roxanne Neal took that, decided that I was a good bet to do that, because it just allowed me to become a professional in a very safe environment. All the way through to when I was working at the Gap headquarters in San Francisco, and I met the first of many mentors who said to me, Celina, I think you should study at Harvard. And I said to him, I'm not a Harvard type, because we all have images in our minds of different stereotypes and different people. And I said to him, I don't sail in Cape Cod, Jeff. So that's not who, I didn't picture myself to be that kind of person. Well, fast forward, I went to the Kennedy School of Government, now called Harvard Kennedy School, and that transformed my life. My life before that was really a life of, it was a good life in California, but it was I want to say a local life. And when I went to the Kennedy School, it literally felt like the world opened up to me. And, um, and from then on, working in the global health space, became much easier. Um, Not easy, but easier, certainly.
Absolutely.
And, from there, I went to New York and worked in HIV and AIDS with the business community, and had the incredible pleasure and honor of working under Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, who tied together diplomacy and business and strategy in a way that, he was one of the masters. And getting some time to sort of watch him and listen to him and learn from him was really fantastic. And then from there, I went to Angola with the UN, and wanted to really be at the epicenter of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, to see what it looked like on the ground, and had some incredible lessons there. I'll tell you, the biggest lesson I learned in Angola was, um, you if you want to be effective, sometimes you need to step out of your own way, because you may not be the best messenger for your message.
Ooh.
So every time I'm in this situation where it feels like, there's a little bit of conflict, or, I'm not making the progress, or being successful in the way that I want to be, I have to ask myself that question. Maybe I'm not the right messenger. So, do you want to be effective, or do you want to be, on top, or do you want to be sort of in the lead? And sometimes being a great leader means stepping back. Sometimes being a great leader means making space for other voices that are going to be much more effective. So Angola was really career shaping for me in that particular way, because imagine, I was a young Asian American woman plopping myself in Africa for the first time ever. And I was there to help the Angolan government, all older, African men, um, to shape their HIV/AIDS agenda and policy. I was not the right messenger in that situation, but it took me months to get to that realization. And then I recruited the help and support of another older African man in the UN system, and it was really um, game changing. We moved policy. We moved policy to focus on sex workers in Angola, because that's where the epidemic was raging. And yet, in their HIV policy, sex workers were not mentioned at all,
Wow.
because of the, Catholic
Stigma. Yeah.
underpinnings and value system of the country. And I knew this was like the most important thing to get inserted into that policy, but they weren't listening to me, right? So I had to figure out another way to get to that end. And it wasn't going to be through me.
Right. I think that's such a powerful statement that you shared. Like, at being a leader, sometimes you're not always the right messenger.
That's right.
And do you care about moving the mission forward, or do you care about being the face? And the ego that you and I often talk about,
Mm.
that, that so many people can get lost in, like, do you care about that, or do you care about the work? And
Yeah.
I think that's just so
Yeah.
telling of who you are. Tell me one value that kind of remained consistent across all of your roles.
Um, I really can I cheat? I need two. Can I have two?
Sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
The first is relationship. Um, for me, relationship is so important, that I'm not willing to sacrifice that for maybe an incremental gain.
Mhm.
That is, this, Tashana, well, like I really, and in terms of how I manage the team, in terms of what I think about, in our partnerships with other organizations, I think about the quality and the state of the relationship. Um, and often that means saying, "Oh, I was wrong," or that means saying, "I'm really sorry. I really messed that one up." That is so fundamental, I think, to how I think about Women Heart as an organization, not just me as a leader, but Women Heart as an organization more broadly. The other thing that has to sort of, you know, phrase it in your question, what value has really stayed with me the entire way through my career? And actually, this is a value that has stayed with me throughout my entire life, is the value of resourcefulness. And I think that that value comes from our experience as a family, as an immigrant family. I was born in the Philippines, and we came to the US. I came to the US when I was 6 years old. And, my mom was the scrappiest head of household you'll ever meet. I mean, it was my mom and my dad, but my mom really ran the show. I mean, if many of us are honest about how we were brought up, mom ran the show.
Mhm.
Um, and that was no different in our household. And my mom was the queen of coupon cutting. I still remember, being, 9 years old and standing alone in the line at Hughes Market, with my coupons, because coupons often had a limit of one. So my mom had multiple
Yes.
and we would all be in a row. Um, and that value sort of carried on through everything that I've done, including how I run organizations. This is a third organization that I've run, and it is a really important value to be infused into an organization so that it becomes an organizational value as well. Um, and I think it's just smart management as far as I'm concerned, but it also just comes from a really deep place, of getting the most value, for your very limited resources.
Indulge me for a minute. Close your eyes and imagine what your organization would look like if you had your very own team of marketing experts dedicated to growing your organization. Let's make this vision a reality. Schedule your complimentary marketing audit today. We'll talk about what's working, what isn't, and how we can help.
We share the value of relationships. I'm a relationship marketer. That's how I approach everything. And the first episode of this podcast, I had my mom on because she was so fundamental in teaching me, modeling for me, not teaching me, in terms of you do this, you do
Yeah.
that. But she really modeled how you build authentic relationships with people and how you just love people,
Mm,
care about people beyond what they can do for you.
mhm,
It is something that is so needed today.
mm,
We all seek community and connection. which is such a beautiful thing that is happening at Women Heart. And the second thing about being resourceful, we in some really challenging times, right? And especially in the nonprofit space, how are we resourceful? How do we make the most out of our partnerships? How do we um, really work together and create collectivism, which we talked about here as well, and um, create situations where we can all go further faster together, right?
Right.
So I know a little bit about your personal story, but I'd love for you to share as much as you're comfortable sharing a
Yeah.
little bit about how your own personal heart journey has
Yeah.
shaped how you lead here at Women Heart.
Oh my goodness. Big, big question. Um, so I started at Women Heart in 2019. Fit as a fiddle as far as I was concerned. I'm a rock climber, I'm a runner, a yogi, I go paddleboarding. I love being outdoors. I can spend weeks on end living out of a tent. Um, and so in 2021, when I started having spikes of my heart rate and spikes in my blood pressure. Obviously, I was alarmed. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. And I went through 2 years of regular visits to the emergency room because these spikes were unexplained. And the doctors each time would say, it's nothing, you're tired, you're anxious, you're having a panic attack, you're stressed. And that was true. I mean, it was a hard time. So I was very eager to believe that because I didn't want anything to be wrong. But of course, the irony was like seeping into me that I'm running this heart disease organization for women, and I'm telling them to, empower themselves and really advocate, when they go to the doctor and make sure they're getting the right tests and all of that. And here I was, getting sent away with no diagnosis each time. It happened, I think, a total of 9 times before I finally was able to see the cardiologist that I thought um, would be would listen, frankly, believe and be proactive. Um, and so that happened in March of 2023, so a full 2 years after my first symptoms. And I said to her, I think I need to get a certain kind of test called a test for microvascular disease. And she agreed based on what she saw in my records and got me in to see, she said, I have just the right person to do this for you. So he's an interventional cardiologist in Washington, D.C. And made the appointment on my birthday. I thought, what? I can't think of a better birthday gift to give myself than an answer to this question. And I was in at 6:30 in the morning, and within a minute, less than a minute of him starting the test in the cath lab, he said, "Happy birthday, you're not crazy." Basically, he figured it out. He found out what was going on, where I was turned away by 2 previous cardiologists, and 9 ER visits, and multiple tests were run. So I don't want to dismiss those, but nobody was curious enough to take that process to the end. And so to get back to the question about how this has impacted my leadership of Women Heart, I feel deeply when I hear story after story after story of a woman being dismissed, misdiagnosed, having delays in their diagnosis, not getting the proper treatment, and sort of just, accepting suboptimal care, saying, I don't think he's really listening to me, but he's my only option. Um, I get obviously really charged up, and, pretty insistent that, you have to be relentless until you are satisfied with the answers that you're getting from the healthcare system. And obviously, that comes from such a deep place of lived experience now. Whereas before, it felt like maybe an academic exercise of knowing kind of what the right thing is, right? Is to encourage people to advocate for themselves. But now having gone through that myself, um, and I think every day, gosh, if the CEO of WomenHeart took 2 years to get a heart disease diagnosis, what more for folks who are not as plugged in, who don't have the
Absolutely.
same network, who don't know, many, many, many cardiologists. Um, so yeah, it has really fundamentally shaped um, the way I do this work. And I think the biggest thing, Tashana, that has changed in the last 2 years is I know that my voice has gotten stronger. I can feel it because it
Absolutely.
comes from a place of knowing that is just, priceless in the work of patient advocacy.
Absolutely. And, we talk about it in the Treat Me Right campaign and all of the work, the through line of Women Heart, right? It's really about misdiagnosis and really showing up as advocates for women who are going to the doctors and being turned away year after year after year and having,
Yeah.
and some losing their lives, many, because, oh, you just got a headache, take that Tylenol,
Yep. Yeah.
right?
Yes. These stories, come into our inboxes on a regular basis, and it is infuriating.
It really is.
It's unjust and it's not fair, and it's just so many things that keep us going in this organization. Right, like you said, times are tough for everyone, but times are really tough for nonprofits right now. So you've got to have a North Star, and preventing a woman from dying because of a misdiagnosis or a delay in diagnosis is what keeps us going.
Absolutely. So the work of Women Heart, let's talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
you really are showing up every single day and for women who are living with and at risk for heart disease. Tell us a little bit about a day in the life of your work at Women Heart.
Oh my goodness. So at our core, we are um, peer patient organization. We train women living with heart disease to be peer supporters and advocates and educators in their communities. And that is really foundational to everything else that we do at Women Heart. These Women Heart champions are trained at the Mayo Clinic. So um, a lot of our time is spent, organizing that, recruiting women to go, preparing them with pre work, um, bringing them to Rochester, Minnesota, to the actual Mayo Clinic, and having them be trained by some of the most incredible cardiologists on the planet, who are just as passionate about a women's heart health as we are. Um, and then the other parts of the work are about developing campaigns like the one you mentioned called Treat Me Right. We have somebody on our team, Jody, who is a genius at creating titles for campaigns, and this was one of our winners. Um, we also engage with partners on a daily basis, and partners including companies that are generous with their funding of our work, with other nonprofits that are just as committed to the issue of women's heart health as we are. We are engaging more and more with small startups who are trying to do more for the women's heart health space. That's really fun. These small companies are innovating and really trying to fill the gap, right? There's a lot, I talk a lot about problems in the healthcare system or problems that women face to try to get a diagnosis, for example. Um, but we can flip that script and talk about that as a market opportunity. And
Absolutely.
these small companies are jumping into that market opportunity which is amazing. And we want to be a small part of that journey for them. So we have figured out, how to create, we're calling it a startup council. And so yesterday, we spoke to two small companies who are really trying to tackle some of the barriers that women are facing to be treated and be diagnosed, etc. And then, I have the pleasure of spending some of my day working with my team. And Tashana, you know all of them, but they are a dynamo team, um, you know, equally passionate and committed to this work. So smart, so creative, and so grounded in what our mission is, so that, anytime we get frustrated or, we hit a wall, we can just sort of take a step back and, remember why we're here, why we're doing this work. And so I am an extremely lucky person to get to do the work that I get to do every day. Um, not just because of what our mission is, but because of the team that I have around me to make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked a bit about, a lot about the mission of Women Heart and, being patient centered and, the awesome champions who really are the boots on the ground in terms of taking
Yeah.
work out and educating the community. Talk to us a little bit more about the support that the everyday woman that is listening to us could possibly get through, visiting the Women Heart website and
Right on. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, about my own journey, and I think about how in the early days of, having these symptoms but not quite sure what was happening, I wasn't ready to talk to another person about what was happening. And so I think the starting point for anyone who might be in that situation is to go to the website and look at all of our resources, our educational resources, our webinars that you can obviously watch, in privacy in the comfort of your own home. Um, you may not be ready to connect yet, or to initiate a relationship with a peer educator or a patient. But you can absolutely um, learn more about what might be happening to you. All of our materials, all of our webinars are evidence based. You can think about Women Heart as a sound and data driven and factual source of information, which I know can be tricky out
yeah,
there. There's lots of different sources of information. But Women Heart is, anytime we put anything out, it is vetted by medical professionals and folks who are at the top of the cardiology game. Um, I would say then that the next step sometimes is you might, get a diagnosis, or even before getting a diagnosis, you might want to talk to somebody who's been through what you've been through. And so we have various forms of peer support. We have a program called Sister Match, that matches you one on one with a Woman Heart champion. And that's really like, we call them big sisters. You're the little sister, and the champion that you're speaking to is the big sister. Um, and you can enter in all the information, as much information or as little information as you'd like, about who you are, so that they can make the ideal match. And then there's participating in support networks or support groups that can happen virtually or in person, depending on where you are in the country. Um, we are in, I believe it's 48 states. And so we've got pretty good coverage. But even in the absence of a support group that is local to you, you have access to virtual support groups, which is fantastic. And I would say one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that, we were able to do much more providing of this support online. And then, if you are so moved and you are a woman who is living with heart disease, You can apply to be a Women Heart champion to do this work in your own community. In fact, right now we are recruiting for the next class of Women Heart champions. So if you go to our website, you can find the application. The training itself, the in-person portion of the training, happens in Rochester, Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic. Um, and it'll happen in October. I believe it's 10 to 13. So check out that information if you are interested in joining not just this community of peer supporters, but this sisterhood, which I am really lucky to be a part of now. Um, so there's a lot there, and there's a lot more that happens as well. We have our big um, Heart Health is Women's Health forum at the start of Heart Month in February of 2026. And that's going to take place on February 2nd in Washington, D.C. So we're kind of in the early stages of our planning for that event. But we keep ourselves busy, Tashana. There's a lot going on. Tashana also mentioned our fantastic campaign called Treat Me Right. And that's just gotten launched in the last few weeks. And just really helping women to better advocate for themselves wherever they are in their heart journey.
Absolutely. It's a lot of wonderful work happening and a lot of ways to get involved and to get educated. So I want to go talk about some of the misconceptions around women and heart disease. What do you find are some of those biggest misconceptions?
Yeah, if we start at the top of that list, as we mentioned at the top of the conversation, heart disease is the number one killer of women, and that is global. Um, and Yet, most women think that the number one killer of women is breast cancer. So that is a really big misconception that is, challenging, therefore, in terms of getting the message out there around prevention of heart disease. I think um, the kind of tangent to that is oftentimes women don't talk about the heart disease that they have. There are, kind of these feelings of shame and guilt around it, partly because it's seen to be something that is your fault
Mhm.
because there are because what we say in the cardiovascular space is that 80% of heart disease is preventable, which means if you have it, then you must have done something to get it. Uh,
Right.
but I wanna flip that on its head, and we have flipped that on its head at Women Heart. Instead of talking about 80% of heart disease being preventable, we talk about everyday heart health, meaning every day, no matter who you are and what your heart status is, you can improve your heart health. Even if you've had 3 heart attacks and survived, even if you are perfectly fit, you can do one thing to improve your heart health every single day. Um, and so that framing is a lot more empowering to somebody who might have congenital heart disease, suffering from heart disease from birth. Um, and so that alone, that misconception that heart disease is not the number one killer, when in fact it is, and that if you have it, you can't do anything about it. I think these are really big misconceptions that we are trying to shift every single day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, what are some of the early warning signs that you find that women tend to downplay and ignore? They really shouldn't.
Yeah. The biggest one, besides the obvious, there obviously chest pain that you've not felt before is something that, needs to be checked out by a doctor. But the biggest one for me is when you all of a sudden feel a fatigue or an exhaustion like you've never felt before. Like I said, I am a relatively fit person, but I remember my first signal that something was really wrong was that I would walk up a flight of stairs and I would get to the top and I'd have to stop and like take a breath. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, that's not, you know,
It's not you.
That this is not right. This is not normal. Um, and what's tricky then is when, when you finally decide, okay, I'm going to get this checked out, and then you go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, you're just tired." Right? When you know the difference between tired and something is really wrong here.
Absolutely.
So that is like, to me, a really important warning sign um for anyone who, experiences that. When you've just pushed it a little too hard one day versus, oh, this is something I could do no problem before, and now I can barely make it. That's a huge difference and a huge red flag.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, ladies, we hope that you are paying attention. Gentlemen, we hope that you're
Absolutely.
paying attention,
Absolutely.
both for yourselves and the women in your lives. This is something that, as Celina said more than once, is the number one killer of women. And we
Yeah.
have to be vigilant in spreading the word and really um, taking good care of ourselves and those around us, right?
Yeah.
And giving space. You talk a lot in your brand, more personally, about the stress component of it. And so
Yeah.
many women are so laden with stress. We all are, but especially women. And being the caretakers,
Hmm.
and the one running the show, as you mentioned earlier, um, and that stress has a cost.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, we've had conversations in the past about um the race and gender components and bias in our healthcare systems that carry over into heart health, especially
Hmm.
for Black and brown women.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
what can you say to that?
Before I want to speak to that, Tashawn, but before I do, I want to go back to what you just said about stress,
Sure.
because there's something that's really important here, which is when I talked about, exhaustion, a different exhaustion, that's important to look after or look out for. But one thing I want to highlight for us is that our society, we celebrate the suffering of women. I mean, let's just put it plainly. We
Yes.
celebrate the suffering of women. Women celebrate the suffering of women. We celebrate the suffering of our own, right? So we kind of are so proud that we put ourselves last.
Hmm.
We hear it amongst family members. Oh my goodness, isn't she an incredible mom? She puts everyone else before her, as if that is something to celebrate. And I just want to put it out there that we have to retrain society to uplift women when they care for themselves, because we want to be around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You don't want to burn out. You don't want to run yourself into the ground. You don't want your family to run you into the ground. And so I want us to really, part of what feeds into this dismissing, right, of like symptoms of heart disease is this like almost martyrdom or this badge of honor. I'm like
Absolutely.
putting, I'm feeling
Absolutely.
exhausted. I'm putting myself last. I'm not even taking care of myself. I'm not exercising. I'm not doing these things that I know are good for me in service of, the health and happiness and safety of my family.
Hmm.
But in the process, what happens if you then, because of all of that self-sacrifice, you get sick and you pass away? Who is left to then take care of this family that you really love so dearly? So I just urge you, women out there, to take care of yourself because you love your family, to take care of yourself so that you can be there for the long run, to take care of yourself so that you can be at your happiest and best self, so that everyone around you can also be happy and healthy. I just, this whole notion that we accept suffering is something that runs through systems, something that runs through society, something that runs through families. And we've got to do something to change that, so that women are not dismissing themselves.
It is so true. It is so true. And I'm so glad that you stopped to talk about that, because it is the being a martyr, right? It's a badge of honor that
Yeah.
I woke up and I did the things and I cooked the dinner and I've been going 12 hours and I worked. And, and society, um, we dishonor ourselves and we give others permission to dishonor us
That's right. That's right. That's right.
and holding all that stress. So, one of the things that we do in our household is like really trying to train our 8-year-old to understand that mommy goes for a massage, mommy gets tired, mommy needs her
Absolutely.
quiet time.
Mhm.
And thank God that I have a partner that's really supportive of that and advocates for that. That's enough. Leave mommy.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Let's go play outside because mommy needs time too. And that's something that just doesn't happen. Or we want to be the martyrs, so we pretend like we don't need help and we don't
Mhm.
don't need to unwind and we don't need to go to the park and take a walk by ourselves or be with girlfriends or whatever that is for us.
That's
We
right.
do not celebrate suffering here.
Good.
Right?
I love it.
No, I love it. I love it. So back to the question, it
Yes.
plays in perfectly because
Yeah.
these communities seem to uplift suffering as a Black woman and you as a brown woman.
Yes.
We can speak to it.
Yeah.
So the race and gender disparities
Yeah.
in the healthcare system overall, that trickle over into heart health.
Yeah. So, I think that if you were to ask any healthcare provider out there the question of, do you think that you treat all your patients equally? 99% of them will say yes.
Hmm.
So they don't perceive themselves to have any bias. But we know from data that there, in fact, is bias. Black and brown women die at a higher rate. They are less likely to be given the right diagnostic tests. It takes Black and brown women longer to be administered an EKG and a troponin test, which is um, um, the test the enzyme test that they use to determine if you've had damage to your heart, which then tells them that maybe you've had a heart attack. Um, and it takes women longer to be seen with symptoms of a heart attack in the ER, right? So there's a long laundry list, right? And again, like the clinicians who are seeing patients don't perceive themselves to have this bias, and yet the data bear it out, right?
Absolutely.
Um, we also know, for example, that even though there are only 15% of cardiologists are women, we know that patients, whether they are female or male, of female cardiologists have better outcomes. We also know um, that if you have a provider who is the same race and gender as you have better outcomes. Right. So all of this just tells us basically, right, that there are differences in how we treat patients. And the sooner we kind of acknowledge that, the sooner we're able to move on that and do something meaningful in terms of interventions. So that's a lot of our work as well is, you know, talking less about um the color of our skin and talking more about outcomes of women of color.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the fact that I'm a brown woman. It is the fact that brown women have worse outcomes in our system.
Right.
So, our points of advocacy are really around creating checklists, creating guidelines and standards to be administered to everybody, no matter what. Um, to look at metrics like response times, um, to look at metrics like follow up times. The other statistic that we know is if a man and a woman have a heart attack and they survive, 1 year later, on 1 year follow up, that woman is more likely to die than the man from a heart attack within that 1 year.
Oh, wow.
It shouldn't be that. Why is it? It shouldn't be that. They are both in the system. If both of them have survived heart attacks, that means they are, they're a high risk patient for a second heart attack. And therefore, follow up should be the same, and treatment and medication and all of that should be the same. So, why is it that a woman is more likely to die of a heart attack 1 year out?
Mm,
Right? So, our advocacy is really about looking at the system and making sure that we are using that data to inform practice, so that we can get to the bottom of why these disparities exist.
absolutely, absolutely. And with World Heart Day coming up, what's a message that you want to share with women, especially those women who say, I'm so busy, they're high achieving women. What do you want them to hear loud and clear?
Um, what I want them to hear loud and clear is that your suffering is not helping anybody. I want them to know that your self care is what is going to make you that much better of a mom, that much better of a partner, that much better of a sister or a daughter,
Absolutely.
or a community leader. Um, when you are healthy, your family is healthy. So I really want us to turn martyrdom, this value of martyrdom on its head, to say self care is the ticket to a vibrant and happy and healthy family.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so powerful. Well, Selena, I know we have to go. So I want to have a little bit of fun with you before you leave me
Okay.
on a quick lightning round. So I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind,
Okay.
your favorite way to recharge after a long day,
Paddleboarding on the lake.
your coffee or tea order.
Tea, matcha tea.
Okay. A wellness habit that you swear by.
Um, Water. Let's see,
Yes.
bug.
Yes. I'm with you. Uh, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh. Um, Say yes.
I love it. And what book would you recommend?
Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
I love that. Love that book. Well, Selena,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your honesty, your heart, and your leadership. You've given us all something to think about, and you've reminded us about showing up for ourselves and our communities. And it's sacred work. It really is. To my listeners, make your heart a priority. And for the women you love, please make it a priority for them as well. And to learn more about Women Heart and how to get involved, visit them at womenheart.org. We'll have all of their information in the show notes. Selena, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Tashana. It was a pleasure.
All right. Till next time, stay rooted, stay connected, and stay in a relationship. Bye bye.